Welcome, my friends, back to Beyond the Well, where forgotten histories and untold legends awaken. I never expected to find that well, hidden deep in the woods behind my house. But when I touched its sacred water, I saw more than my own reflection. I saw another world. A world shaped by light and shadow, by heroes and tyrants, by choices that still echo through time. Join me as I uncover the stories of Aldarion that lie beyond the well. Mohrvanna, Harbinger of Destruction. Episode 5, City of Corruption. The city of Korvale rose in front of him. Its towers leaned like broken teeth, blackened by centuries of smoke from the inland forges. The banners that once bore the emblems of Lovak's old kings now hung faded and torn, bleached by the salt winds off the gray sea. Fishmongers shouted over one another in narrow alleyways. Street children darted through the throngs like rats beneath wagons' wheels. The stench of sweat, stale wine, and rotting fish wrapped the streets in a heavy cloak. Here was no shining jewel of the north. This was something else entirely, something Mohrvanna saw as useful. He paused just inside the gates, his hood drawn low, his garments deliberately chosen, simple, worn, the fabric of a wandering scribe or a failed priest. No one looked at him twice. That was just the way he wanted it. The guards had hardly given him a glance. Travelers were common here, so were beggars, and neither were worth a special inspection. At his side padded Velkira, silent and fluid. Her black coat shimmered beneath the weak light, her muscles taut beneath her sleek frame. The few guards who noticed her gave her a wide berth. A panther, even a domesticated one, made men nervous. That, too, was intentional. Mohrvanna whispered softly to his companion as they moved. "Easy now. Let them see you. Let them feel you. Fear is far more useful when it's patient." Velkira's golden eyes scanned the crowd, ever watchful, ever loyal. The lower districts of Korvale sprawled outward like a festering wound. Mohrvanna wandered its streets for days without drawing attention, watching and listening. The markets were filled with desperate merchants, their tables heavy with spoiled fruit, rusted tools, and stolen trinkets. The temples still burned incense to Aldarion, but the priests' eyes were hollow, their pockets heavy with bribes. Everywhere he looked, there was rot beneath the surface. Not just political corruption, but something deeper, spiritual exhaustion, in fact. This city, he could feel it, was ready to fall. They simply didn't know it yet. At this point, he did not intervene, not yet. Instead, he whispered, small things, barely noticeable at first. The first seed. A child from the shanties gravely ill, her family too poor to pay the temple physicians. One night, after her parents had given up hope, she was found miraculously healed by morning. On the door frame above their threshold, someone had drawn a crude sigil in white ash. No one knew who had done it. The second seed, a minor crime lord who ran protection rackets in the dockyards, began to suffer from terrible visions in his sleep, screams of something black and shapeless pressing against him, choking him. His screams echoed through the night until one morning he was found dead in his chambers. No wound, no explanation, only blood pooling beneath his eyes. The third seed, a city guard captain who had grown bold with extortion, simply vanished. His men found his sword and cloak folded neatly upon his bed, but no sign of a struggle. Rumor said his screams had echoed from beneath the sewers that night, though none dared investigate. These acts and many more were carefully staged. Each death or miracle whispered about in the back rooms and alleyways. The stories began to grow and spread faster than wildfire. A name emerged among them. It was simple, the Hollow One. Mohrvanna remained unseen, but his myth grew daily. Velkira followed him silently through the twisting alleys each night, her eyes gleaming in the lamplight, her nose twitching at the scent of fear. At times he let her be seen, crouching on rooftops, staring down at guards from the shadows, her breath steaming in the night air. More than once, a simple glimpse of her was enough to turn a hardened man into a trembling coward. The Nexus pulsed faintly beneath the stones of Korvale, hungry and eager. Mohrvanna fed it carefully. Small sacrifices, whispered oaths, threads of fear and ambition. But this was not about blood, not yet. This was about recruitment. And that is when Canon Relic found him. It was not an accident. Relic had been searching for months, driven by both ambition and desperation. He was older, his once regal priestly robes now patched and worn, but his eyes still burned with a glint of dangerous faith. Not to Elion, but to the idea of power itself. Their first meeting was simple. Mohrvanna was waiting in a ruined courtyard behind one of Korvale's abandoned sanctuaries. A full moon painted the broken stones. Velkira crouched beside him, ears perked. The air was cold, but still. Relic approached with caution. 2 men flanked him. The old priest bowed his head low, offering no pretense of superiority. You are the one they call Hollow, Relic said softly. Mohrvanna did not respond. I've watched your work, Relic continued. I've seen the signs you left. The city whispers of you. They believe you're a sorcerer, a ghost, maybe a demon. Still, Mohrvanna sat silent. I don't care what you are, Relic said finally, his voice a thin rasp. What I care about is what we might do together. Mohrvanna tilted his head, studying the man. Speak your purpose. Then Relic smiled thinly. The king's hand grows weak. The nobles grow fat. The priests grow lazy. But there are some of us who still hunger for something more. You are not the cause of rot. You are the answer. Mohrvanna allowed the silence to grow heavy, watching how Relic shifted uncomfortably under the weight. Then he said finally, I will listen. Relic nodded eagerly. The bait had been taken. The sanctum lay beneath the burned shell of the old sanctuary of the Twin Lights, a chapel left in ruins after the riots of 3 decades past. Its walls were half collapsed, its bell tower shattered, and the moss crept through the broken stone like veins of decay. Few entered these ruins anymore. Fewer still knew of the hidden passages beneath the altar. This was where a council was gathered. Mohrvanna descended the spiral staircase after Canon Relic, silent and deliberate. Velkira followed at his heel, her eyes catching what little torchlight flickered in the passageway. The very air grew heavy with every step, as if the weight of betrayal had soaked into the very stone. Below, the chamber revealed itself, circular, carved from black granite, lit by a ring of oil lamps. 7 chairs stood, spaced around a wide obsidian table. The walls were etched with old symbols of Lovak's first priesthood, long desecrated. The Council of Reclamation, as they called themselves, was already assembled. They were a fragile lot, Mohrvanna observed, men and women who once held power, nobles, priests, ex-generals, all now cast aside by the ruling monarchy or disillusioned by the temple's rigid hierarchies. They saw themselves as visionaries. Mohrvanna saw them for what they truly were, scavengers, circling a dying beast. Canon Relic gestured toward an empty chair prepared for their newest guest. Our brother joins us tonight, he announced. Mohrvanna offered no bow, no greeting. He sat in the chair as Velkira coiled beside him on the stone floor, her head resting on crossed paws, golden eyes half-lidded but alert. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Bravik leaned forward. Bravik, thin, sharp-eyed, with fingers like talons, clutched the edge of the table. He had become the treasurer under the High Temple before his exile. His voice always carried a tremor, as though straining to suppress the panic beneath. This one? Revik asked, sneering slightly. The Hollow? Relic nodded. He has proven himself already. Bravik scoffed. Miracles whispered in alleys, dead men with no wounds, parlor tricks and fear-mongering. What do we really know of him anyhow, Relic? What does he have to offer besides superstition? Mohrvanna's eyes slid to Bravik. He didn't speak, he simply stared. That silence stretched, cold and uncomfortable. Relic cleared his throat. Brother Hollow has demonstrated talents none here possess. The city already whispers his name. Fear is useful, Servant Bravik. Fear can also turn upon itself, Bravik snapped. I'll not wager my life on games of a hedge sorcerer and this animal. Velkira's head lifted at the word. Her eyes sharpened, narrow slits of gold fixed on Bravik. The panther's lips curled slightly, revealing a thin flash of her teeth. The chamber tensed. Bravik's face paled. Still, he pressed on, emboldened by the attention. We are not children to be frightened by parlor displays. We are not blind zealots to fall at the feet of some silent specter, especially a new one. How can we trust him? This council was formed with purpose, not superstition. The king's spies are close upon us. The gallows stand ready for traitors. I'll not have this thing endanger everything we've built. Mohrvanna remained perfectly still. Velkira rose silently to her feet, her muscles rippling beneath her black coat. She padded forward, slow, deliberate, and circled behind Bravik's chair. The man froze, his breath catching in his throat. She moved like living shadow, her claws clicking softly against the stone floor. Intentional. Nobody stopped her. The other council members sat rigid, unsure whether to intervene, unsure whether to move at all. Mohrvanna's voice broke the silence at last, soft, smooth, and utterly calm. You speak boldly for a man so uncertain of his own survival. Bravik flinched but held his ground. I speak for caution. You bring poison into our midst. Velkira's growl rumbled through the chamber. The sound was primal, vibrating in every chest, gnawing at their instincts. It was not simply the growl of an animal. It was something deeper, unnatural. Mohrvanna's eyes never left Bravik's. Poison? I am not poison. I am clarity. Velkira's tail flicked once, and her fangs bared as she stood directly behind Bravik now, her warm breath against his neck. Bravik's hand twitched towards the dagger at his belt. Mohrvanna raised one finger. Velkira lunged. Her paws crashed down on Bravik's wrist with bone-crushing force, pinning it flat against the table. The dagger clattered uselessly to the floor as a muffled gasp escaped Bravik's throat. Blood welled from beneath the crushing weight of the panther's claws. Mohrvanna then stood, not quickly, but with terrifying precision, and approached. He spoke just above a whisper. Each word slithered into all their ears. You misunderstand your place here, Bravik. You see shadows and call them tricks, but shadows have teeth. And they hunger. He leaned close enough that Bravik could feel the chill of his breath. You sought to build a new order. I offer you something greater. A world unbound by kings or temples, where men like you are not merely exiles. Bravik's lip quivered. You'll destroy us? Mohrvanna smiled faintly. No. He placed a palm gently on Bravik's head as though blessing him. Only you. The light that was pulsing from the torches in the room faded, and in an instant black tendrils coiled from Mohrvanna's hand and slithered across the man. They wrapped around his throat, tightening with each breathless second. His eyes bulged, his mouth gaped silently. Velkira raised her paw as the shadows finished what she had begun. There was no scream, only the wet snap of cartilage as his throat collapsed inward. The body fell limp. The shadows withdrew. and Velkira began to feast on his now smoking flesh. The chamber went dead silent. Mohrvanna turned slowly to the remaining council, his voice low, a reverent whisper. "Does anyone else question my place at this table?" No one dared breathe. Canon Relic lowered his head. "We serve, Brother Hollow." Mohrvanna nodded once. "Then let us begin." The council, now broken and terrified, bowed in unified silence, and for the first time the true seed of the Mavir was planted. Over the next few weeks, Korvale shifted. Not overnight, of course, not with fire and rebellion, but with whispers, with shadow, with fear. Bravik's death was never announced. His estate was quietly dissolved, his debts forgiven, his name left to rot. The council did not speak of him again, not because they mourned him, but because they feared to. Under Mohrvanna's hand, their secret cabal was no longer a loose collection of bitter exiles. It was becoming something else entirely. He had no need to shout or threaten. He allowed Relic to be the public voice, the administrator who kept order among the council. But beneath that shell, the true engine churned, a growing network of loyalists answering not to the council, but to him. It began with the lowest cast-offs, beggars, cut purses, street orphans who had never known mercy. Mohrvanna moved through the back alleys, sometimes in person, often through emissaries. Each recruit was chosen not for skill, but for desperation, for hunger, for that raw emptiness he understood better than anyone alive. They called him the Hollow King in hushed rumors now. Some whispered of miracles, others of curses. All feared him, and from that fear loyalty was born. Velkira was always near him, the great black panther padding silently at his side, eyes growing faintly in the torchlight. Her presence alone dissolved most doubts. One by one, the chosen were brought beneath the ruined chapel, which now had transformed into something different entirely. The chamber had changed since Bravik's death. What was once a simple meeting hall had become a sanctum of ritual. The obsidian table remained, but now crimson runes spiraled out across the stone floor, etched with blood, carved with steady hands into the very foundation of the city. The brazier burned violet black as its flames breathed and pulsed like a living thing. Mohrvanna stood before them. Tonight was going to be the first true induction. "You come before me as nothing." His voice filled the chamber. "No crown, no bloodline, no name. Only hunger and the will to rise." The first group, a dozen youths, not older than 20, stood with their heads bowed. Some trembled, some stood rigid, trying to mask their fear. None dared meet his gaze. He continued, "Korvale's leader hides behind gold. Its priests hide behind dead gods. But you will hide behind nothing. You will stand where they fall." A single-robed acolyte approached, carrying a long, polished wooden box. He presented it to Mohrvanna, who opened it. Inside lay 12 identical blades, short daggers curved and wicked sharp, forged of blackened steel, each engraved with a single rune at its base. The rune for silence. Mohrvanna gestured. Each initiate stepped forward one by one. As they took the blade, Velkira prowled the perimeter, her eyes fixed on them, ensuring that none wavered. The spoken threat of death hung as heavy as the smoke. When the final blade was claimed, Mohrvanna spoke again, now lower, more intimate, his voice curling through the chamber. "You are now Mavir. The hidden flame, the hand behind the crown, the eye that does not blink." He raised one hand, open and empty, the other with a ceremonial blade. He dragged it across the palm. Black and red blood dripped onto the brazier, and the violet flames hissed and flared. "Loyalty unto death," he said. The initiates answered in unison. "Loyalty unto death." Betrayal unto pain. Betrayal unto pain. The Mavir never forget. The Mavir never forget. Their voices rising with each chant. The ceremony was not complete. Another acolyte approached carrying a small iron brand, its tip glowing orange from the heat of the brazier. One by one, each initiate presented their arm. The brand hissed as it pressed into flesh, burning the rune into their skin, permanently marking them as Mavir. Not just members of a secret order, not just followers of a cause. Property. Mohrvanna watched each searing press with cold detachment. Their screams were brief. Those who hesitated were given a simple choice: endure or be cast aside. All endured. When the last mark was sealed, Velkira circled once more, as if inspecting her master's new flock. Satisfied, she returned to Mohrvanna's side. Ken and Relic stood behind him, silent and pale. He had objected to the brands at first, but objecting to Mohrvanna was like arguing with the abyss. Afterwards, Relic approached him privately, his voice strained. It may spread too fast. If the king's informants find out... Mohrvanna cut him off. They only see what I wish them to see. Korvale's eyes are filled with greed and rot. Their minds are easy to blind. And the priests? Relic dared. They are irrelevant, Mohrvanna said coldly. The gods they serve have no power here. Their temples will collapse beneath their own weight. Relic swallowed and dared not press further. Mohrvanna turned to face him fully. This is not rebellion, Relic. This is a foundation. The king will not fall to war or sword. He will fall to silence, to whispers, to decay from within. Relic nodded shakily. And when the king falls? Mohrvanna's eyes darkened, voice lowered into something ancient and older. Then we move outward, as rot spreads through timber. For the first time, Relic understood. This was not about Korvale. This was not even about Lovak. This was about all of Aldarion. The morning air over Korvale was heavy, unnatural. The usual rhythm of the city, the bell ringers, the haggling merchants, the temple hymns, was absent. An eerie quiet blanketed the capital like a funeral shroud. The streets were swept, but no wagons rolled. The great banners of Aldarion sanctum hung limp in the windless dawn. Even the gulls circling from the inland sea seemed to have abandoned the skies. Today, something was coming. Mohrvanna stood atop a spire overlooking the king's plaza. Velkira crouched beside him, her body tense, her golden eyes scanning the empty streets with hunger. The first calling was prepared. Below, the plaza stretched wide, a perfect arena. At its center stood the marble statue of Aldarion, hands outstretched in eternal benediction. The statue had watched over Korvale since the reign of the first High Kings. It had seen wars, famines, and rebirths. Today, it would see something far older. Mohrvanna observed the scene without emotion. His breathing was steady, his posture almost serene. Below, the last preparations were unfolding, all according to the design he had patiently sown these many months. It was not rebellion. This was a demonstration. At the far side of the square, a procession emerged, a royal delegation. Their robes shimmered in the early light. The king's advisors, the high priests, the temple scribes, all arriving for the annual Blessing of the Crown, a public ceremony designed to remind the city who still ruled. The guards flanked them in tight formation, armored and armed. Mohrvanna saw them as lambs. At his side, a young lieutenant crouched, one of his early Mavir initiates, masked and eager. All is ready, my lord, the man whispered. Mohrvanna said nothing. He raised one hand slowly and clenched his fist, the signal. It began with a whisper. A merchant collapsed near the outer fountains, gasping, convulsing as blood foamed at his lips. Within moments, 2 others followed, citizens seemingly plucked at random, their bodies betraying them as their insides erupted in synchronized failure. Panic spread. Guards rushed forward, but before they could act, a scream echoed from the west gate. There, another body fell. This one, a captain of the king's watch, his throat slashed so precisely that he bled without sound. Another, and then another. Every corner of the square began to unravel. By the time the royal procession registered the scale of what was unfolding, they were already surrounded. From the edges of rooftops, the grates beneath the cobbles, and the shadows between market stalls, Mavir assassins emerged like smoke, masked, armed, and coordinated. They struck fast, each target predetermined. One priest fell with a blade between his ribs before his mouth could even form a prayer. Another was pulled screaming into the shadows, his voice abruptly silenced. A noble collapsed, gurgling, and his guards spun uselessly in every direction. It was a slaughter. It was cleansing. The high priest himself, draped in gold silk, staggered backward toward the great statue, his guards forming a desperate shield around him. But as they moved, Mohrvanna descended the spire. He walked calmly, straight into the chaos untouched. The people saw him, the black silk mask with its serpent sigil glistening like wet ink beneath the morning sun. His eyes gleamed beneath the mask, silver and violet, impossible to mistake. Velkira prowled ahead of him, her massive form parting the sea of terror-stricken onlookers. None dared challenge her. She was his shadow, his unspoken weapon. By the time he reached the foot of Elion's statue, all resistance had collapsed. The surviving guards fell to their knees, disarmed and hopeless. The square was his. The high priest, quivering, backed into the base of the statue as Mohrvanna approached. Who are you?" the priest stammered. "What are you?" Mohrvanna said nothing. Instead, he placed his palm upon the marble base of the statue. Whispers escaped his lips. Not speech, but ancient syllables that did not belong to man. The Nexus responded instantly. Black veins spread like spiderweb cracks through the pristine white stone. The statue trembled, its outstretched hand shattered. The once gentle face of Aldarion fractured, black ichor leaking from it like oil. Gasps erupted from the watching crowds. "Your gods do not protect you," Mohrvanna whispered, his voice like silk. "They never did." Behind him, his Mavir soldiers began gathering the surviving prisoners, the guards, the clerics, the nobles. Some they would spare, branding them as silent tools. Others would serve as examples. The high priest collapsed to his knees. Mohrvanna crouched before him, eyes level. "You rule by fear masked in devotion. I do not hide behind the gods. I am fear." Velkira stepped forward, her whiskers tickling the priest's face as her fangs bared. The man wept. I will serve." Mohrvanna smiled behind the mask. Yes, you will." The culling had started. By nightfall, the king's court declared martial law. Whispers of the masked serpent spread across every quarter of Korvale. The spy master offered rewards for his capture, but none came forward. No one saw him leave. No one dared betray the new shadow that had gripped their city. In the burned chapel beneath the ruins, Mohrvanna returned to his sanctum. The council greeted him, heads bowed. Relic was there, pale but obedient. The newest initiates stood in a wide circle around the blackened brazier, daggers drawn, arms extended for the brand. A dark brotherhood of knives sealed in blood and silence. The Harbinger's first city had fallen, a demonstration of the true war yet to begin. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for coming with me beyond the well. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking, following, or subscribing. And if you have a moment, I would love a review. Your feedback truly makes a difference. If you want to dive deeper into the well, visit beyondthewell.net for show notes, transcripts, maps, character descriptions, and much, much more. And until next time, keep seeking, keep dreaming, and keep telling your story. Bye.